I believe we are live. All right, so welcome everyone for the October community call. Hopefully everyone's doing well. So I believe the live stream going, and hopefully you can see the screen that I'm sharing. Like, give me a quick thumbs up. That would be great. Cool. So yeah, I think we'll get started. Well, thanks for the thumbs up on the chat. Yeah, so just a quick reminder on the community code of conduct. I mean, if this is the first time you're joining any of our events, we do have a code of conduct which you can take a look at, and we just want to ensure that we have an open and welcoming community for everybody, like all good open source projects. So the agenda for today, you've probably seen this on Slack and other social channels. We have JK, who's dialing in all the way from Philippines. It's after midnight his time. He's going to share his user story, which we just published a couple of days ago. And JK, I owe you a bag of local coffee beans since you're out of quarantine. So just let me know. We have a couple of community news. I mean, you probably noticed a lot of things happening over the past few weeks on the community front. We'll talk about that, including the roadmap discussion. We'll have Ryan sort of recap what we've done in Q3 and what's planned for Q4 for open source roadmap. And as always, Ryan will also wrap things up with quick product updates and feature demos. And if you have any questions, I mean, feel free to type them in the chat on Zoom or on the live stream as well. So, all right. So without further ado, we'll get things started with the ShopBack user story. I mean, hopefully some of you have already read the user story, which was just published. I'll switch back and forth between the presentations and the user story. I mean, ShopBack, I mean, when I first met JK, I mean, the way I think about the company is sort of like Ebates in North America or Rakuten in other regions. You have opportunities to get, sales pricing or rebates on your purchases. So this is a sort of a similar company, I mean, with huge presence in APAC. So without further ado, I mean, JK, I'll turn things over to you, and I'll have you sort of walk through the slides. And if people have any questions, they can chime in here or type their questions. So.
Sure. Thanks, Ray. Yeah. Can you guys hear me fine?
Yep.
All good.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, as Ray mentioned, ShopBack is a cashback company that's very active in Asia Pacific region. We still haven't tapped into other regions as of yet, but so far we're doing quite well in Asia Pacific. We're now the largest shopping rewards and discovery platform in the Asia Pacific with a presence in 9 countries. So if you go to the blog, you will be able to see all the countries that we have presence in. So like, for example, Singapore, which is our home base, South Korea, Taiwan, and even reaching Australia. And yeah, so we're pretty active in Southeast Asia. Yeah. And in the middle of 2020, when COVID struck, we were still able to power close to around $3 billion in sales, with over 5,000 merchant partners across all our regions. So, business, even it gives credence to being a startup where you have to continuously pivot. Like Cube.js is, I would say, it's also kind of a startup, right? So we were able to pivot into many different business models during the heart of the pandemic, and we were able to power through. Yeah. And yeah, ShopBack being a cashback platform, we're very reliant on customers purchasing through all of our partner merchants and stores. So this is very heavy on basically transactions that all our customers have with ShopBack, which goes through ShopBack. So this is where Cube.js comes in. So we use Cube.js to power all of our analytics to show relevant data to our stakeholders and also our customers as well. We show data like sales volume, purchase value, and it can even go to like aggregate of like how we upsell customers, how how they retain customers to their stores and all that. And yeah, so all of these heavy data queries are being done through Cube.js. And we started in 2020 with Cube.js. And it's been an ongoing progress to, ongoing process to improve and keep using all of the new features that come out with Cube.js as well. So yeah, so what you're seeing now is a technical architecture of how we use Cube.js in ShopBack. As you can see, it's there's mainly three things here. The front-end application, which is hosted in AWS S3 as an S3 site, which basically it's what our merchants see and what our stakeholders see when they try to access the application. And this front-end application is using React as well, and it uses also the libraries that is provided by Cube.js, which is the Cube.js client, which helps us query the Cube.js services efficiently. And all of this goes to our backend application. So as you can see, it's the heart of the whole architecture here. It's the Node.js Express application. Sadly, we were not able to deploy Cube.js in its own Docker image due to limitation in manpower, but it's definitely in the pipeline. So the Node.js application is using the integrated Cube.js within the app itself, and it being mainly a reporting tool, all of the data that is being used in the application comes from all the other upstream services that we have. So there can be like something like a transaction service, something like a cashback service, and then voucher service, and all of these different services trickle down data from their applications down to our main Cube.js application. And then that's where we show all of the aggregated data. And we also make use of the Cube.js refresh worker to allow our pre-aggregations to be refreshed in a timely manner, since it's a very bad experience if the first user of the day gets to see a very laggy performance when they open the site, right? So we've enabled this Cube.js refresh worker to keep refreshing our data at the time where we least have traffic, which is around this time exactly. Yeah. And apart from having the refresh worker, to further improve latency for our users, we also implemented Redis. So Cube.js, if not implemented with Redis, it will just use the application in memory cache. But yeah, given the amount of data that we process, we had to use Redis to alleviate the load for that for the data access queries that we have. So yeah, so once a user accesses a query for that day, it immediately is cached in Redis, and then every subsequent call of that same query, it would just pass through Redis and then fetch from Redis instead of going to the main database. So yeah, and the last one would be the database itself. So we use Postgres for our application, and we store all of the raw data that comes from what I mentioned, the upstream services are being stored directly into Postgres. And then the refresh worker is in charge of generating all of our pre-aggregations from that raw data, and then stores it also in the same Postgres DB. So we've tried using different DBs as well, and also tried touching on KubeStore, but same situation as earlier with the lack of manpower for now, and it's a crazy shopping season. We don't really have time to move forward with this. So we just keep it in the same database as well. So everything right now is stored in the same Postgres DB, both the raw data and the pre-aggregations as well. So yeah, and the ETL part, all of those are done manually on our end. So we built our own custom logic for all our ETL. We didn't use any existing technologies to handle the ETL part, but so far it's been working fine for us. So yeah, this is the main implementation of Cube in ShopBack.
And JK, I don't think I asked you this before while we were working on the user story. I assume you had this like in-house ETL tool for a while, right? I mean, even
Yes,
independent of Cube.js. Oh, cool. All right, so let me move to the next slides. And monitoring to see if there are any questions. But all right, go ahead.
So we've implemented Cube.js around 2020, like early middle 2020, and it was fine for a while because during that time it was a relatively new project and we didn't really touch on all the different business units. So the amount of data that we had wasn't really that big. But as we went along towards the late 2020 and early 2021, we started hitting issues because, well, the number of data basically increased, and we reached millions and millions of data, and we just could not keep on using Cube.js just to hit the main raw tables that we had. So we were looking into the documentations of Cube.js as well, and one of the things that caught our eye early on was pre-aggregations. We didn't really have time earlier that in 2020 to implement it, but especially when the need arose, of course the business side will definitely have to make time to implement this. So we started looking into pre-aggregations early 2021, and as you can see in the charts below, we've definitely had very nice results when using pre-aggregation. So the table that you can see above is actually the P95 and P50 query loading time. So these are the things that we always report to our stakeholders as well. You will see here that P95, which basically means the 95th percentile of all people that access your queries. In our case, access our Cube.js queries. The 95th percentile was actually hitting around 20 seconds, which is not really that good for a user experience, right? So when the complaints started coming in and we had more time to further improve, we implemented pre-aggregations, and you can see that the number slowly went down to right now it's about 6 seconds. Yeah, and actually it went beyond our goal because our goal was around P50 around 3 seconds, and then we even went as far down as like 1.5 seconds. And you can see the chart below is like, the graph below is like a graphical representation of the query time as well that we use to present to our stakeholders. So yeah, so you will see here the actual drastic improvements of using pre-aggregations on your Cube.js queries. And aside from that, we've seen how we can drastically improve query time with pre-aggregations. The next step would be, of course, to use Cube Store, because from what we read in the documentation, it's like very low latency, and if I remember correctly, like somewhat infinitely scalable or something like that. So that's definitely something that we're interested in. Probably after the crazy shopping season here in Asia, once it finishes, we'll be able to touch on Cube Store again.
Yeah, and I think we already mentioned this in the blog post. This is something you've already investigated. You just have to pause in terms of like a Cube Store. And then I think we talk about that here, implementing Cube Store and a couple of issues that you're looking into. But hopefully those will all get resolved, and hopefully you'll be successful with this pretty soon. But,
yeah, these were all pretty early on when we didn't really have enough time to go into it. So when we encountered issues, it kind of like temporarily halted the exploration there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but moving forward, I think we can probably look into Cube Store a lot more.
Right. Are there any questions? Or JC, I wasn't sure if you had any questions or not, but go ahead.
Yeah, a couple questions. I haven't had a chance to check out the blog post, but is this primarily built? Are you leveraging Cube for internal purposes, like internal reporting of your data, or are you surfacing it to your customers as well?
It's a mixture of both, JC.
Oh.
So it's internal as well for our business development team members. So they can kind of leverage on using the tool to when onboarding, like for example, we're striking up a new contract with a new merchant, a big merchant, something like that. They can use this thing to say like, hey, your competitors are actually like their numbers are getting higher, maybe show a glimpse of the graph. So that's more of the internal use. Aside from that, our customers as well. So we have two customers, right? One's the consumers themselves who actually get the cashback, and another is the stores and the merchants, which we have partnerships with. So those stores and merchants actually have accounts in this application that they can log into, and they can view the performance of their stores. For example, they can see that this outlet in this region is not working, and the transaction, like a sales day, the transactions in this outlet goes crazy high. So yeah, so it goes both ways. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, thanks for that. The other question I had was around kind of I was curious about your mix of real-time usage versus kind of relying on the caching to keep your performance high, and compared to how much you're leveraging the pre-aggregations. So I was curious if you're like leaning really heavily one direction or the other, or if it's kind of a balance.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So for right now, right? Actually, on business side, they want to keep on increasing the real timeness of our data, but we haven't really had the chance to look into how to implement that, because ever since when the project started and up until like early mid this year, it was really more of like a reporting analytics kind of platform. So we didn't really have to have real-time data. So it was fine for stakeholders and all the top management to have like 1 day late data. So in that regard, we can efficiently use, the refresh worker and Redis to store everything efficiently in the cache and make the experience better for everyone.
Gotcha.
But
Cool.
but moving forward, I think we would move a lot closer to having a real-time functionality. It's just that we'll see how it goes first.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Awesome. Great questions. Thanks, JC. Any other questions? Or, the other thing that I quickly want to point out that, JK, I don't know if you want to really delve into that. I like the fact that you wrote up, like, here are some of the learnings or even, I don't know if you want to call like mistakes. Definitely some things you learned as you started using or implementing various features in Cube.js, including pre-aggregations. So hopefully, people will find this very useful. I think you pointed out like a number of things that you learned, and especially on pre-aggregation, how to continue to like improve the performance of queries, as you mentioned. So.
Yeah. So I can touch on a few of the learnings that we had. Yeah. So once we started using pre-aggregations, right, it was pretty awesome because we immediately started seeing the impact in terms of the query time when we started using pre-aggregations. But I would say one of the sneaky things that could happen to users that are quite new to pre-aggregations is actually making sure that they hit pre-aggregation. So it might be because of our use case also, because we have tons of different queries that hit pre-aggregations. We have, in our homepage, at least there will be around 20 plus queries running all asynchronously. I think I've had a discussion with Igor about this on how to optimize this in Slack before. But that's a sample of how much we leverage on pre-aggregation. So homepage, you start loading that one page, immediately you can hit up to like 20 plus different queries trying to hit pre-aggregations in RTB. And sometimes it's easy to miss out that actually 1 or 2 or maybe 3 of these queries are not hitting pre-aggregations at all. If 16, 17 loads fine, the page can load quite fine, but you can have like a few queries that are quite slow. It can reach like 9-10 seconds or so. So we've had this challenge, and we had to really dig into like how we monitor our queries and like have the necessary tools in place to be able to say that like, hey, this query is quite slow. Like, is this using pre-aggregations? Or maybe churn out logs that we can log out that this query did not use pre-aggregations, something like that. So yeah, I think that was one of the things that persisted for quite a while until it was an ongoing fix kind of situation for us. Yeah. Cool. And Yeah, and the other thing here is more of like being more like optimizing more on pre-aggregation. So once we had pre-aggregation, it was pretty cool, right? It was very fast. But then we saw that we could actually go a bit faster, a bit more fast. So yeah, we saw that basically since we store it in the same database, it's still also basically a database table, right? So we could apply all the other optimizations that we had. Like for example, the best case I think is proper indexing. So with the level of cardinality that we have, right? So for example, a like you can have a store, a user, and a time that the transaction occurred, and what else? Maybe the country as well. So all of these different cardinalities, if you put it in one pre-aggregation, it can, even though it's pre-aggregated, it can reach to a lot of rows. So with this, right, it made a lot of sense for us to actually started indexing our pre-aggregations as well. So indexing by itself has dramatically improved the performance of our pre-aggregations. And yeah, and aside from indexing, it's more of like being more mindful of how the data would look like. So sometimes it's how you structure your pre-aggregations as well. Sometimes it might make sense that you don't just pre-aggregate everything and maybe change the ETL process itself to move to a new table and pre-aggregate that table instead. So yeah, so it's really more of like the different use cases of, it's really more of like baking in pre-aggregations into the how you think of displaying the data that you have. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, not only for the user story, but joining us like way past midnight your time. And
No worries. Yeah, my pleasure.
and yeah, and then I mean, we certainly understand if you need to like go to bed pretty soon, but I mean, you're obviously welcome to stay. And I just have to say, you sound more alert and together than I am at 9:30 in the morning my time. So thank you for that. All right, so we'll move on to the next topic here, community updates. And I think RTM, you're on. So, I mean, hopefully a lot of folks, I mean, helped us spread the word on Cube Cloud and saw the news. But RTM, I'll let you quickly discuss launch. About a week. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, a little over a week ago, we officially launched it. But I'll let you cover this news topic.
Sure. Thank you, Ray. Yeah. And I'll try to not spend a lot of time on it because we have a lot of exciting product demos and roadmap discussion ahead. But I just want to say thank you everyone for your support during the launch last week. Your upvotes and comments on a ProtoCon that helped us a lot to spread the word about the launch of a Cube Cloud. And just kind of a few words about what a Cube Cloud is and how it came together. When we only open sourced Cube like more than 2 years ago now, we started to see a lot of people reaching out, like to Pavel and to me on Slack and different platforms, and just kind of, like chatting about best practices on the data modeling, best practices on the development, staging, and eventually going into production and monitoring, and also on how to run and scale applications in production. So we've been helping a lot of community members since then, and we've been kind of accumulating feedback and the different patterns on how to run Cube in production and optimizing Cube along the way with all your feedback. And sort of Cube Cloud is a result of that work and that knowledge that we started to accumulate, which basically it's a managed platform with all our experience how to run Cube applications efficiently and how to scale them efficiently, but it also a set of useful tools that we started to build for us, first of all, internally when we started to play around and to run and manage applications in production, but eventually for all the users, tools like query debugging and tracing, pre-irrigation UI, management suite, and all of that. I truly believe that we built something very helpful, and our sort of mission is just to give enough tools and infrastructure to help you run and manage Cube application and really spend time on building things, not managing them. So I would encourage everyone to try out. It has a free tier, and we also try to make the entrances very low level. So even if you wanted to run a small production, the price should not be much higher, or even it's going to be lower than you're going to pay to AWS or GCP anyway to run in production. So we try to make it really easy to start and with a low level volume entrance. So yeah, thank you everyone again, and please feel free to ping me or ask any questions about a Cube Cloud if you have. And thank you again for your support last week.
Cool. Thanks, Artyom. It was definitely an exciting week. So let me quickly move on. Like Artyom said, we have a couple of demos that we want to share. Just one, like a last announcement before I turn things over to Ryan. We have our next workshop coming up in about 2 weeks, or exactly 2 weeks. So same time as a community call at 9 a.m. Pacific time. If you haven't registered yet, please go to events/multi-tenancy. And you'll be able to register there. And then one of the asks, I think I mentioned in the social post last week, like we have a couple of optional questions for you to answer. If you're already using multi-tenancy, we'd like to understand the reasons why you're using multi-tenancy and specific topics you want us to cover. They'll definitely help us as we're preparing materials for the workshop in a couple of weeks. So I encourage you to do that. And you probably saw like on the webpage, like we have a purple banner on the workshop. So it's relatively easy to find if you haven't registered yet. Yeah, and then we also have a Slack channel, events workshop. Feel free to leave any comments or ask any questions there. And hope to see a lot of you in a couple of weeks. Okay, so next up is on the roadmap. Ryan, do you want me to just go through the slides and have you talk, or do you want to take control over? Do you want to share your screen?
Since I'll do a little demo at the end, yeah, I'll just share my screen.
All right, let me stop sharing that. Thanks, Ryan.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to do a quick recap of what we did for Q3, and I also just want to call out especially the fact that our roadmap is publicly visible. I know there's been a little bit of feedback in the community that we aren't always folks aren't always sure where the roadmap is. It's in GitHub, and we'll also work on how we can make this more publicly visible for everyone. Thank you for the feedback to those of you in the community who gave us that feedback to make this clear for everyone. For this call, I'm just going to recap what we did in Q3. The work was primarily focused on pre-aggregations, as you can see from our epics. We really wanted to make pre-aggregations as accessible as possible to the overall community as they can be. So for example, the rollup designer is probably the most prominent example of that, essentially a no-code feature for which you can create the schema definition for a pre-aggregation and just add that directly into your Cube.js schema. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that. And I think it's going to help kind of make it the onboarding to pre-aggregations a whole lot easier for folks. We also introduced new types of pre-aggregation. So rolling window being the most prominent one. So instead of having, I guess, like a statically defined dates for your groupings and pre-aggregations, we now have the ability to use rolling windows. We didn't get to everything that we wanted to do with respect to pre-aggregation. So the notable one there would be around introducing default values for refresh worker concurrency, queue concurrency. So those are intended to make it helpful for folks just so that they don't have to do that configuration themselves and being an expert on a per DB basis what these settings should be. we still have that left to do. We also did, outside of pre-aggregations, quite a bit of work, excuse me, on the improving the experience for users of big data sets. And when I say big data sets, I mean typically using data warehouses or query engines such as Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift. So we've worked on these drivers quite a bit, and I think we've made some significant improvements there. So if you're users of any of those data sources, I think you'll be pleased to work with these new features. So that's a quick recap of Q3, and then for Q4, we have quite a few very epics planned for Q4, so I'm really excited about these. The SQL connector is a big one. So many of you in the community have provided input here, basically requesting that Cube be integratable with some of the most popular business intelligence tools out there. So for example, Apache Superset, which we prototyped a connector for here. So the use cases here are typically, what we've heard is it ranges from, we just want to hook up Cube to some of our internal BI tools, or maybe, we don't want to bother building our own front end for an external BI external facing BI tool. So we're just going to use something like Superset here. So this SQL connector allows, since SQL is like the most common dialect or language to connect with these tools, we're building this connector to enable that integration. And then streaming database support. So we also have received feedback from some of you in the community that you'd like to hook up streaming data sources to Cube in the backend, such as Kafka. This one is also quite exciting. I think we'll start with a KSQL integration, so that's for Kafka, and then start to explore other streaming database types as well. And so this will allow for us to basically stream in that data directly into Cube Store, so that you can treat it just like any other, traditional database in the backend. And then working on rollup joins is also a big one. So this has been asked for more and more as pre-aggregations have become more and more popular amongst the community. We see a lot of people with multiple data source types. And so to enable a pre-aggregation that essentially spans data across these multiple data sources, there's quite a bit of work to do here. So that will be also a focus area for Q4. And then I just want to do a quick demo of how this will work in Superset. Y'all can see my tab for Superset, right? Yeah, okay. So yeah, what we've done here is essentially added a new backend, make with the SQL connector now Apache Superset. So for those of you who don't know Superset, Apache Superset is a popular open source data visualization tool. The reason why we picked this one to prototype first is because they also have a very strong open source community, which we gravitate towards. And they also had some folks in the community reach out to us and offered to help with this integration. So that was appreciated as well. But so from Superset's perspective, we're now treating Cube like, I believe it's a MySQL backend from this perspective. And I can just query data on the Cube side like I would any other database. And Superset, of course, provides a lot of great visualization options here. So if I, for example, want to use a bar chart instead. Oh, just button there. I just can't see it with all the zoom controls. And convert this to a bar chart. And then I can change parameters of my query here. So this is the count of orders. We use this orders data set a lot for those of you who have joined our workshops and calls in the past. Let's say I want to change this to by month. And you notice the queries are very quick because we've used pre-aggregations on the back end, and I can say group by some dimension that I've defined in this pre-aggregation, for example. So let me change this back to months because that's the title of it. So yeah, that's essentially it. And then you can use all the neat features in Superset then to kind of improve the user experience on the BI side. Just add a legend. Yeah. So and we can also take a look on the Cube side. So you can see these are the queries that I was running on the orders table, and they're all fast. They're all pre-aggregated. Earlier, I think last evening, when I was setting up this pre-aggregation, these are the times that it was taking before we had the pre-aggregation. So you can see like 14 seconds here, 5 seconds here, and now we're sub tenth of a second response. So that's great. And yeah, if I like how this is turning out, then I can add this to dashboard. Oh, this is a new dashboard. Let me just add it here. It's this button. Yeah. Oh, I just drag it, I think. Yeah. So this is kind of how I can set up my own dashboard in Apache Superset using this data that I'm now querying directly from Cube. So yeah, we're really excited about this. I think next we'd like to hear input from you all on what other BI tools you would like to see us add integrations for in the future. So for example, if it's Tableau or Power BI or whatever, please just either mention me or any of us like Ray or Igor or RTM on the Slack, or even better, if you feel comfortable, raise an issue on the GitHub repo for Cube.js, and then that'll allow other folks to kind of upvote any of the ones that they feel are the ones that they would most like to see in terms of a BI tool integration. So yeah, that's the SQL connector.
Yeah, I mean, good point, Ryan. I'll probably start a thread on that too on Slack or even or Discord.
Okay, great.
So people can provide feedback. And yeah, if people want to comment directly on the epic that we open, it's public. So if you want to say, hey, this superset is great, but I'd like to see like Metabase or Tableau or other tools that Ryan mentioned, that would be great. And I think JC had a question on the chat. So if you want to address that.
How is Superset connected to Cube? I believe it's through a REST.
I probably can jump in, and since we have a SQL connector, so actually Superset issues a SQL against Cube, and Cube can now understand the SQL. So Ryan, if you can go please to the Superset and click on these 3 dots here on the chart. On the chart specifically, and there is an option view query. So that actually SQL queries are being executed from Superset to Cube, and Cube can now speak SQL basically, and so it understands SQL and can transform the SQL into its internal query representation, and then queries the data and then send data back to you. So technically it could be queried not only from Superset, but from any SQL client, right? We're just showing you a demo of a Superset.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And is that a Cube Cloud only capability or the hosted version as well, self-hosted?
It's going to be it's already actually merged in open source. So, and it's going to be an open source in Apache 2.0.
Yeah.
license.
let me get the pull requests for the SQL connector. I'll paste it on the chat as well, so you
Awesome.
can take a look. Yep.
Well, that's really powerful.
Cool. Any other questions about that? No? Okay. Yeah, and while we're talking about community feedback, I guess one thing that was notable about another notable community contribution was this spec for GraphQL support from Luke. This has been something that's been on our radar for a while to support GraphQL. We don't yet have a clear path forward for a solution. You know, the two central issues to this that we need to think about carefully are how to deal with polling over long periods of times for our queries, and then also how to define basically the structure of the request or the schema for a GraphQL interface. So these are two central issues that I think we need to explore more. And so we're having just a lot of discussion on issues that have been posted in our repo through the past few months. I'm hoping that we can get to this next year, but we do need to kind of get feedback from you all, first of all, on how we best build this, and then figure out what the right solution is here to support GraphQL sustainably. So yeah, that's, if you have any comments or opinions, please come to this issue or open a new issue if there's some other ideas you might have for this, and we'll be happy to chat. And then quickly, some product updates as well. I don't have a whole lot here today because we've honestly been spending a lot of time on KubeCloud the past month because we're prepping for our GA. Actually, I can do a demo of Rollup Designer for this one. And this is possible in open source too. I'm just using cloud because I can look at things like query history pretty easily. But the big thing for Rollup Designer is now, before you had to run the query, and the query had to be had to not hit a pre-aggregation for you to be even able to launch Rollup Designer. Now it's just by default up here. So even if I haven't run a query, I can launch this feature and start to add pre-aggregations to the data schema before I even run the query. And we've made a couple of UI improvements. I think these tabs are new in terms of switching between the definition of the rollup and the query that you're trying to match in terms of being compatible with it. And then a couple other minor UI updates as well on the settings side. So you can now add a cron expression, I believe, that wasn't there before, for the every refresh key. So that's real quick, the Rollup Designer update. We had a bug with the count distinct approx measure. And so that was, in some cases, always returning a value of 1. And that was because of a hyperlog corruption issue in the back end. So we fixed that. Oh, and we did not mention Helm charts in the last call, even though this was actually introduced in, I believe, in August. So we have now these example Helm. Oh, that's link's broken. To fix that, it's in here. Yeah. So if you want to check out the Helm charts, there's a couple of folks in the community who are asking about this, and I believe it's Luke also who contributed these. So if you want some examples for Helm charts, I highly encourage you to check these out on our repo. Thanks again for the community contribution on that. And then just calling out that we're spending a lot of time now on the SQL connector and the KSQL, the streaming data source driver. So hopefully we'll at least for the SQL connector, we'll have more announcements and documentation released in this month and the coming month. So stay tuned for that. And that's it for me.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we had a pretty packed agenda today. We went a couple of minutes over. Like, looks like JK's still on, but thanks everyone for joining and for asking a lot of good questions on chat or live. So hopefully you'll have a good rest of the month, and hopefully we'll see you at the workshop in a couple of weeks or the next monthly call in November. So have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.